Tech Snippets Today with Joseph Raczynski.
All right, Jeff, co-founder of Sei Labs. Thank you so much for joining me today.
I appreciate it, Joe. Thanks for having me.
Looking forward to it. So this is, we're at, of course, Token 2049 in Singapore. It's the first time I've been here. People always told me that it's quite similar to like Dubai or Abu Dhabi or something like that. And it has a similar feel. How's the experience been so far for you?
Yeah, I'd say the reputation that Singapore and Token 29 tends to have is it's a lot of cluster. You get so you almost like OD on crypto over the course of the week. So given it's your first time, I promise you you're gonna want to take a breather after.
No, I know.
Yeah.
I did go to the one in Dubai, Token 2049 in Dubai. I think it was in May or something like that, and it was one of the best conferences I've been to for crypto in years. I mean, the food, the events, the cold plunges, things like that. It's remarkable. All right, so let's focus on some of the things that are going on right now. I'd love to hear a little bit more about you, your past, what led you to being co-founder of the organization. Take it from there, please.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I'll start from the beginning. A couple of the sort of highlights of my background, what led me down that sort of safe path. I was born and raised in San Francisco, spent my entire life in the Bay Area. I'd say pretty lucky in there because you get to see technology and how quickly things progress. And a lot of your peers, really making a big dent in both the technology space, but globally as well, given how far sort of tech has penetrated in every industry. So from, I'd say, a pretty young age, you are convinced, why not me? Why?
100%.
Yeah, exactly. I first spent my career at Goldman, so doing a lot of the tech investment banking, some of the larger sort of M&A transactions. After Goldman, worked on my last company with the same co-founder.
Okay.
And then spent a bit of time at Coatue, so one of the largest hedge funds, did public and private investing, so investing in companies like ByteDance, so owners of TikTok, Stripe, companies like that. And then when I left Coatue, I had initially started working on a decentralized exchange with my co-founder. He spent well over 4 years at Robinhood.
Okay.
And he was particularly impacted by the sort of lack of transparency in traditional finance. It's something I'm very familiar with, given working at some of the largest institutions.
Yeah.
But you almost kind of take it for granted, exactly how difficult it is to break in, how difficult it is to get real transparency in that space. It's just something I've always known.
Yes.
In Robinhood, it really boiled over because of the GameStop situation.
Yeah.
A lot of the people internally in that company weren't even aware of that decision they made to shut off buys and basically stop access for a lot of users. So that was the prevailing reason why we wanted to work on initially take Robinhood, put it on chain. So just make it permissionless, make it trustless. And when we tried building a decentralized exchange, we evaluated all of the layer ones, the sort of infrastructure opportunities we can build it on at the time. So we looked at Ethereum, it was Avalanche was another option.
Okay.
Solana was just getting started.
All right.
And it became pretty clear you can't actually build a scalable decentralized exchange on any of the L1s that existed at the time. So, even though we wanted to build an exchange, it ended up being that the more important problem was building the right infrastructure for it.
It's key, no question.
Yeah. That's the sort of impetus behind Sei and what it came to today.
Fantastic. So before we go down that path, and I definitely want to go there, great pedigree. So it makes a lot of sense in terms of why you came into this space. I have a number of friends who are at Goldman. I'd love to know what your conversations with those individuals, your friends, your old colleagues are like when they said that you've gone into this space. Because the Goldman people that I speak to are still like, what? Crypto? Blockchain? Nah, it's not going to happen. It's not going to work. It's just still fringy. I don't think it's that at all anymore, but are you still sensing that? Are you still hearing some of that? Or are people like, no, we get it?
Yeah, no, the irony is when I first left even Coatue at the time, I kept sort of Coatue on my LinkedIn. It took a while for me to really change it up. Because the alternative was, founder of like a crypto startup,
right?
Which, candidly was just embarrassing for like most of the folks I was surrounded by at the time. I think once you take a big step back and look at how a lot of the incentives are in traditional finance, it starts to make sense why the default still tends to be that they're skeptical.
Yeah.
They're incentivized not to almost want that sort of adoption because it really is sort of antithetical to a lot of what traditional finance and then how fees are distributed,
Yes.
who eats most of the fees.
Yes.
Right? Most of the fees, end up kind of attributing to Goldman. You know,
Okay.
they're a company that sits in the middle. They've already built that sort of reputation. They built the trust. They own the sort of gateways, and they harvest, you know, the profits and the revenues from exactly that position. You know, crypto only serves to sort of question and really jeopardize all of the hard work that company has done. So
Fair
it
enough.
makes sense.
No, all right, I get that. Okay, so let's get back to the company or to the labs itself. So my perspective has been in the industry for a real long time. Part of the things that I focused in on with like Ethereum early on or Solana early on, Avalanche as well, is the trifecta, right? So decentralization, security, and having so that redundancy. So that whole picture there. Can you describe what the benefit is of Sei with respect to, I know you guys don't use transactions per second, but use like a gas version of that which makes sense. Can you describe a little bit about the infrastructure and why it is positioned better than maybe an Ethereum, whatever, for huge amounts of data or transactions on chain?
Yeah, that's one of the most common questions we get. What's the difference between Ethereum, Solana, Sei? And
Right.
why do we need another sort of Ethereum alternative, another Solana
The layer
alternative?
one, yeah.
Yeah. You know, it goes back to the sort of core thesis behind Sei. You know, we think that there is one core value prop of crypto. It is exchanging some kind of digital asset, like a financial transaction at its core. It could be stable coins, it could be some different types of tokens, you know, institutional RWA asset, doesn't matter.
Okay.
It's those sort of financial transactions, that's the core value prop.
Yeah.
There's so much other stuff that gets sort of marketed and people can get excited about. It's really difficult to see the substance there. So if you believe that that's the core value prop, you know, the core use case of crypto, the most important problem in crypto is building the infrastructure to allow that use case to grow. That's it. There's no problem that's more important than that. And we believe that the best approach to solving that problem, that infrastructure problem, is combining the best of Ethereum, which is the development framework.
Yeah.
The language, in the same way that English is, you know, has the deepest network effect globally. It's deeper than the US dollar, than currencies.
True.
It's deeper than Facebook, Amazon, you know, the big marketplaces. The more people who know English, the more critical it is to have that skill set. You know, you're missing out if you just don't know how to speak that language because so many other people know it. The same applies to development languages. You know, so we saw that example in just traditional technology, JavaScript, very early language. Is it the best sort of language for development today? Is Ethereum and Solidity the best language for development in crypto today? Very easy to argue against that.
True.
It doesn't matter, unfortunately. It's like everyone already knows it.
Right.
So that's the biggest strength of Ethereum today. Combine that with the biggest strength of Solana. The fact that Solana uses updated hardware, updated chips.
Everything's
just like
easy.
using the latest MacBook. It's going to be a faster experience than using something from, you know, the 2000s. It's something that simple. Being able to combine those two components gives you what is the most easy to adopt, easy to build sort of infrastructure, plus the sort of performance and the speed. So that's maybe the easiest way to think about, say, the design decision that, you know, the blockchain is taking compared with Solana and Ethereum.
Okay. No, I appreciate that, and it makes sense. Just a little bit more on this because I am curious. Like layer twos on Ethereum, how do they compete against that if it's in the same ecosystem as Ethereum? I know you guys are connected to the EVM, right? Is that okay? So in a way, it could be. I hate saying this, but could it be like considered a layer two? I know it's not, but it's so well connected into it. Therefore, it could be a part of the ecosystem. So. How does that look? I mean, where's the sweet spot for you in terms of the institutions that you're looking at working with, the space that you're looking at going after? What is it that you're, I guess, focused in on there?
Yeah. I'll address the sort of first part of, you know, what's the relevance of L2s, how does that sort of interact, and then we can talk about, you know, as a result of that, where should Sei as an ecosystem really focus?
Thank you.
So the difference between L2s and L1s in a very simple sort of approach is, in order to do a transaction on a layer 2, you don't need the layer 2 token. You need Ethereum.
Right.
Just like you need Ethereum to do something on the Ethereum network. The big difference on Sei is, in order to do anything, any kind of activity on the Sei network, you need the Sei asset.
Okay.
That's really important, mostly because that is one of the biggest drivers of that network effect. When you look at early Ethereum, early Solana, what drove that powerful network effect, where the more applications, the more users came, the more adoption, and that kind of drove that flywheel. A big component of that is the token and the asset. The early users of Ethereum, the early Solana users, they were rewarded handsomely because that network effect, they almost grew with the ecosystem. You don't get that same type of dynamic with L2s. In fact, all it does is segment and fragment the
That's
sort of
100%.
the users in the ecosystem. And that's I'd say the biggest advantage of a single sort of platform and a single ecosystem. That's why you see Solana's growth this quickly. Meanwhile, a lot of the big sort of layer 2s that people are familiar with actually hasn't really moved just over even the last 3 years.
There's this discussion within the Ethereum community that they may do a buyback. So in other words, does that make sense? Yeah. So basically going at all the L2s and say, all right, we'll exchange these Polygon, whatever, for ETH. So that's one singular. I don't know how that would work, because it seems bananas, but I'm just, it's funny to see. I don't know anything. You don't need to comment on that, but just.
I'll give sort of my 2 cents. They were effectively attempting to undo a lot of the extra complexity that the L2s brought. The beauty of Solana, the beauty of early Ethereum was it's a much simpler user experience. It's just Ethereum. Like you access the asset, you have to buy Ethereum somewhere.
Right.
And then once you have it, you can start using the network. All of the applications, you didn't have to think twice about what L2 or where are the destinations. It's just one platform.
Okay.
Same beauty in that simplicity sits with Sei and Solana as well. There's just one platform. All of the applications operate on the same wavelength. Once you sort of add in all of the L2s and sort of sub-destinations, it becomes a much more confusing user experience. That's something that they're really trying to address and undo today.
Okay.
And wish them the best of luck. And I think it's a very difficult undertaking.
It will be if they try that. Yes. Okay. So the institution's the sweet spot. Where do you think you use a perfect example. So Ethereum sort of blew up with the ICO market. I feel like Solana blew up with the memes and stuff like that. So what's going to be your blow up in a good way? What do you think will help buoy you all?
That's right. Yeah. And, today, if you look at all of the layer 1s, there's only 2 that has sort of broken into that next category, right? Has built that network effect, has gotten that huge win. It's just Solana and Ethereum. And if you look at what is that next generation, those L1s that have that potential to become that sort of next Solana, I think Sei as an ecosystem is very lucky to be in that conversation. Even being in that conversation, being able to survive cycle after cycle, build up a strong user base and a loyal sort of community, I'd say is already a sort of testament to the foundation and the labs team executing well. With that being said, how does the ecosystem position itself in a way to get that first huge win? The approach that I think the ecosystem has taken has been almost like barbell shaped.
Okay.
Right? There's 2 sides of the extreme. It's being able to focus on basic users, consumers that don't necessarily know anything about crypto,
right.
But are able to reap the rewards of all of the decentralization, the permissionlessness. Those 2 categories particularly tend to be gaming and social. So those are 2 categories that Sei is by far the market leader on. Gaming on Sei is much larger than even on Ethereum, on BNB, some of the largest chains.
Okay.
And that's something that I'd say a lot of people don't know. Most of the gaming users just tend to be normal users in Southeast Asia and China, and it has many strong tailwinds, especially as maybe the economy gets tougher. People don't have as many job opportunities. What are they going to do with their free time?
Right.
I think gaming is a huge part of that sort of social interaction. Social, when people typically think of the biggest social app is usually Farcaster is the name of
Yes.
the application. The number one social app in terms of users is actually Overheard, also built on Sei.
Okay.
Most of their users tend to be college students. So people that are a lot less connected to crypto, a lot less overlap. So that's why you don't hear about it as much. But that's the sort of domination that Sei has on just the consumer end. Then the complete opposite is institutions. Some of the biggest companies on earth. And a couple of the latest and greatest wins, the ways that Sei has really set that up. There was a recent announcement, a big partnership with Apollo, one of the largest American PE firms.
Sure.
There was collaboration and discussions with Wyoming, the state of Wyoming, the most sort of forward-looking state across the United States. They developed a framework to evaluate L1s. Exactly the question you asked earlier. Everyone's top of mind is, why should I work with Solana over Ethereum, over Sei, and all of the other alternatives that exist? I think it's difficult sometimes to get the right answer there because everyone has their own framework. They all have their own sort of conflicts of interest.
It's definitely
maybe they bought one token over the other. But governments and states, they have to look at it truly from a neutral point of view. So I think the framework that Wyoming built, Sei ranked incredibly highly on over Ethereum, over Solana. And I'd say that's a framework that a lot of other institutions, companies and governments have already started taking a look at, just because it's a precedent that they know is already sort of approved by a lot of governing bodies.
Yeah, amazing. All right, while you're at it, is there anything else you want to highlight with regard to recent wins or other things that are going on, new developments, things in that space with the organization?
Yeah, I'd say a big component of how we get that first pop, that first run, exactly what you brought up with Solana and Ethereum, is ensuring that there's a right environment for that kind of innovation. When the right application steps forward, all the users are already there.
Yeah.
All of the sort of contributors, all the investors, they're all already around the table. So when that spark happens, you have the kindling almost to make that into the biggest fire you can.
Yeah.
And that's been a lot of the hard work that has happened, from the early days of Sei, but really concentrated since the launch of the Sei token back in 2023. So over the last 2 years, so much of that sort of environment and that infrastructure around the ecosystem is now in place. So it's almost like we have the dominoes in a row, and all it takes is kind of one to get that sort of a waterfall flowing.
Yeah, so to me, one of the most critical areas I think will absolutely take off, and I'm sure you've already thought about this or maybe you're working on something, is sort of around the agentic AI. So as the agents take off in the next, I've been using agents for quite some time that are pretty darn effective in what they're building, what they're doing. But you're going to have thousands, millions, billions of agents, right? So if you all have that many, I'm going to use TPS because it's just more recognized and known. So transactions per second just seems like a great place to be for that next potential, like Solana pump coin, all those things, right? So that maybe, I don't know, is that something you guys are looking at?
Yes, yeah, okay. Absolutely. So it ironically turns out if you build infrastructure for the financial transaction use case, financial transactions are happen so frequently.
Yeah.
And so much at scale that if you're able to build the right infrastructure for that use case, it naturally covers every other possible use case. That's why gaming and social, things that people don't typically view as financial transactions, end up being the right use case on Sei as well.
Okay, makes sense.
Fundamentally, every company, person cares about cheap, fast, and secure. And that's it. Everything else, you can argue, matters, but it's nowhere near those three big priorities. So everything that the Sei team has done when it comes to architecture and a roadmap standpoint has always revolved around these three components.
Perfect.
The speed piece and the scale piece, that's exactly one of the reasons that a lot of founders and companies end up it comes down to the wire when they're deciding between Ethereum, Solana, Sei, and a couple others. We're always in the sort of final level of conversation and evaluation.
So the only thing that I'll have to ask, just to sort of point it, is the idea around decentralization. So what do you say when people say, hey, it's fantastic, but it's not decentralized as X, Y, and Z. What's the argument there?
Yeah, I think decentralization needs to be a balance. I think if, what tends to happen if a project goes fully towards the decentralization end of the spectrum is you sacrifice user experience.
True.
And Ethereum is a great example of that. One of the reasons why it's slower, why it's more expensive, is it is sufficiently more decentralized. With that being said, say from a Nakamoto coefficient, almost you can think about it as like the sort of decentralization metric,
Sure.
is very close to that of Ethereum. But that sort of difference in trade-off, the extra couple last bits that Ethereum takes has a huge trade-off when it comes to performance and user experience. So I think there's a balance when it comes to the ecosystem where you can get just as much decentralization. Really, the security is the thing that matters. Yeah. The only thing that users care about is making sure their assets are still there the next day. And you can really make sure of that whilst also preserving user experience.
Awesome. No, I appreciate that. Okay, anything else that you'd like to mention before we finish up?
Yeah, I'd say the question that I tend to get the most is, how is Sei going to beat the competitors when it comes to stepping into that sort of storied next Solana type of role?
Right.
What does Sei need to do right? I'd say the go-to-market that Sei needs to take is one of more longevity. It's about really sticking around cycle after cycle, being able to allocate resources, being able to work with the community in a much more lasting way. I think that tends to be lost, especially during great markets. Yeah. Every project, every application, they're just focused on, hey, getting that token out, growing as fast as we can, spending at all costs. And some of the most storied projects, the most storied companies like Chainlink and like Ethereum and Solana, they tend to be able to allocate resources and really push when others are scared. Naturally, we're going to have cyclicality in the market. The market will go down at some point, and it's that moment where the Sei ecosystem should be most aggressive. That's where you end up getting the best ROI.
No, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, my final comment on that is, I've seen some massive organizations, blockchains that have come out like 5-8 years ago at least, and they're still around, but they're not. There's nothing going on in their ecosystem. But they had raised so much money that they're just sort of like chilling. And I'm like, what's going on? How does that work? Like, I don't want to call any of them out, but I could. But it's like no one's using them, no one's utilizing them. So obviously, I know you will not be there because you guys are thinking in a different way. But yeah, it definitely seems like that's the path to go when going forward with this. So, Jeff, thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it. It was excellent.
Thanks, sure. Appreciate it.
Tech Snippets Today with Joseph Raczynski.